everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. As promised, today we have a guest, Raffles. Raffles, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello everyone. I am Raffles. I am currently a 12th grade history student. And as a history student, my favorite historical topics include Eastern European history, Middle Eastern history, African history, South Asian history, etc. And of course, within my scope of expertise is the historical relations between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, he
Mm,
knows everything.
Yeah, indeed.
So today we have invited him to talk about the origins of the Russo-Ukrainian War, which has been the topic for our podcast for the last two episodes. So could you talk about the origins of the war?
Okay. Sure. If we have to go back all the way into the depth of history to talk about the start of the conflict between the Ukrainians and Russians, of course, both these countries are the Eastern Slavic people, are of Eastern Slavic peoples. The Slavic peoples came from the above beyond the Urals in at around the 6th or 7th century CE. And so they came into Europe and inhabited the giant territory of land from the Ural Mountains and all the way to Western Europe to modern day like Germany and Italy. And they gradually became divided into different groups. And the thing is, the first East Slavic polity that was created by the Varangians. The Varangians are a subcategory of the Vikings who came from Northern Europe and subjugated the East Slavic majority people living in around today's Ukraine's Dnieper Basin.
Mhm.
And so this policy gradually became what became known as the Kyivan Rus. And Kyiv was founded in the 9th century as a very important trading port on the Dnieper River that controls the trade from Northern Europe to Constantinople. Because the Black Sea and the Dnieper River are used as the most important, most efficient trade routes. Rather than going over the land and having to bypass, for example, the Carpathian Mountains.
Yeah.
And so the country of Kyivan Rus gradually first of all we have to understand that this is a country dominated by Vikings, the Varangians, but its majority, like over 95% of its population, were East Slavs. So gradually the Vikings became assimilated into the Slavic cultures, and it became predominantly a Slavic state. The state was very decentralized. It was composed of different principalities and different noblemen ruling the state from different important cities. For example, Kiev, Novgorod, and there are also evolved strong cities. For example, Vladimir, near modern day Moscow, Polotsk in modern day northern Belarus, Chernihiv, which is near Kiev but northern in Ukraine. And so this state was consolidated by the Grand Prince Vladimir the Great, who introduced Orthodox Christianity from Constantinople because he wants to emulate the Byzantine Empire success. And after his rule came Yaroslav the Wise, who stipulated Church Old Slavonic, which is the predecessor to modern day East Slavic languages, as the official language, and consolidated the faith by building Saint Sophia's Cathedral in Kiev and also the Golden Gate. And so after that, after Yaroslav, the country gradually began to disintegrate by the noblemen who held each of their strongholds and were unwilling to let the grand prince of the principality from Kiev to control over them. So the divided state eventually saw itself in the face of the Mongol invasion, which came at the start of the 13th century. And at that time, the Mongols subjugated the different policy leaders separately. For example, the Grand Prince of Vladimir was the first person to surrender to the Mongols, which earned goodwill from the Mongols since they stipulated Vladimir to become the most important city in the Golden Horde after this. The Golden Horde is the successor to the Mongol Empire in Russia. And the leaders located in Ukraine, they surrendered. They did not surrender that quickly and were eventually conquered by the Mongols, who razed Kiev to the ground and began a period of darkness in Ukraine in the East Slavic history. During this period, Ukraine and Russia first began to experience a divide because up to then they were part of the same country, but after this they become different territories administered differently by the Mongol authorities centered in Vladimir. And the Mongols or the East Slavs in that area founded a new city close to Vladimir where they put the Autocephalous Church of the Orthodox Church in the area of Russia, and they named this new city Moscow. So that was the origin of Moscow now. And the Golden Horde eventually also fell apart It was defeated in an invasion by Poland and Lithuania from the west in the around the year 3050. And so these two countries gradually subjugated most of modern day Ukraine. And after these two countries united in the Union of Lublin, Ukraine became part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Under this, they received influence from the because both Lithuania and Poland are Catholic, so they received Catholic influence to develop a new religion called the Eastern Rite, which is based on Eastern Orthodox traditions, but listens to the authority of the Pope. So this creates a religious divide between parts of Ukraine and Russia, as Ukraine gradually has its own Orthodox Church, which has customs different to that of Russia. And so Ukraine remained part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, adopting like serfs and listening to the members of the Polish nobility. And so Ukraine became independent for the first time in its history after the disintegration of Kyivan Rus in 1648, led by the Cossack rebellion. The Cossacks were a distinct ethnic group from that are located in several different locations on the Eurasian steppe, most prominently in modern-day Zaporizhia, near the Don River, near the Volga River. So the Zaporizhian Cossacks, they were border guards. You can understand that they were the border patrols of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The Commonwealth provides them with their basic needs, a territory, limited powers to administer their own lands, as well as provisions of food and salary in exchange for these people to guard the frontier against other people, most prominently the Crimean Tatars, who inhabit Crimea up to the 14th and 15th centuries, and the 16th centuries, and regularly raid the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth's frontiers. So the Cossacks, they gradually grew in number, and one day they launched a revolt against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which led to the creation of a Cossack hetmanate centered in modern-day Zaporizhia, which gradually grew to control most of modern-day Ukraine. So that was the Cossack hetmanate formed in 1648 under the leadership of the hetman, whose name was Bogdan Khmelnytsky. And because the Hetmanate was still very weak, it was a small country in the midst of giant empires such as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Ottoman Empire, the growing Ottoman Empire to the south, the Crimean Khanate, and also the growing Grand Duchy of Moscow in the east. Because Moscow has declared its independence in 1476 from the Mongol Empire and defeated the Golden Horde. So that was the beginning of Russia's independence. As Grand Duchy of Muscovy, it has been a very weak country, subjected to frequent invasions by Lithuania, but gradually it consolidated its power. It defeated the Kazan Khanate and incorporated it into vast amounts of territory, so it became a strong regional power. And the Kazakh Hetmanate decided to align itself with the Grand Duchy of Muscovy because they share similar culture, East Slavic culture, and also similar religions. Like they both adhere to Eastern Orthodoxy, though they have different divisions. So the landmark agreement was the Treaty of Pereyaslav in 1654, in which the Ukrainian hetman, the Kazakh hetman of Ukraine, agreed to swear loyalty to the Tsar of Russia, who was the Grand Duke of Moscow back then, and the two entered into kind of a loose alliance. But over the century after this, Russia gradually began to erode the Kazakh Hetmanate's autonomy. It wanted to have a say in the choosing of the hetmans and also the governance of the land, which kind of violates the terms of the treaty. So the Ukrainian hetman, his name was Ivan Maziepa, and he decided to launch a second rebellion against the Russians to declare his own sovereignty. And so during the Great Northern War that Russia waged against Sweden in the early 18th century, Ivan Maziepa chose to join forces with Sweden, but the joint forces were defeated at the Battle of Poltava by the Russian forces. So that led to the complete Russian subjugation of Ukraine. And after this, the Russian historical narrative claims that this is a second reunion between the East Slavic peoples because Russia has always seen itself as the leader of the East Slavic civilization. It is the only independent country to evolve out of the Golden Horde Khanate and to declare its own independence and to rapidly expand. So it regards the union of all East Slavic peoples as its ultimate fate, and that Ukraine is and Russia views Ukraine as a part of its East Slavic empire that was saved from the grips of the Polish-Lithuanians and the Ottomans by Russia itself. So the land of Ukraine should be a part of Russia, be administered by Russia. But the Ukrainians who have developed parts of their autonomy, their religious autonomy, different cultural influences from the European Renaissance, which came from the Polish and Lithuanian courts, regard itself with a separate nation national identity that is not the same to Russia, so they believe that they should not be subjugated to Russian rule. So after 1709, Ukraine remained a part of Russia, which Russia named Novorossiya to further undermine its autonomy. Novorossiya means New Russia or Little Russia. So the next time Ukraine would gain independence would be after World War One. When Russia was embroiled in civil war, Ukraine declared its independence as the Ukrainian People's Republic.
Yeah.
But then it enters the Russian Civil War in several factions. First, there were the Ukrainian Bolsheviks who supported the Red Army of Lenin in Russia, and they allied with Lenin to try to take the whole of Ukraine. And in Ukraine, there was also the members of the Central Rada and the conservatives who allied with the White Army in Russia to try to create a conservative government with the power of nobles and also the dominating Cossacks. The Cossacks were conservatives. And after these two factions, there were also the Green Party. The Green Party led by small farmers, and there was the Black Army, which was named the Makhnovshchina. The Makhnovshchina was led by National Makhno to establish an anarchist government in Ukraine. So these factions just fought against each other, and until the Red Army took control of Ukraine in 1921 and incorporated it into the Soviet Union. So Lenin, when Lenin got control of the Ukraine, he was eager to establish the Soviet Union's bases there. So he tried to treat Ukraine with tolerant policies. One of the first policies he initiated was Korenizatsiya. Korenizatsiya means localization. That means allowing Ukrainian state institutions to use Ukrainian as a language to spread communism and to implement Ukrainians' communist policies. And the policy of Korenizatsiya was ended under the rule of Joseph Stalin, who believed that Ukraine should be a more centralized country, subservient to the Russian Soviet Republic. So it was in this period that Stalin began the first five-year plan to rapidly industrialize the Soviet Union, and to accomplish this, he hopes that there will be an agricultural revolution, which was why he started the policy of agricultural collectivization in 1929. And that emerged the greatest rift in modern Russia and Ukraine relations, which was the Ukrainian famine of 1932 to 1933, termed the Holodomor. Holodomor means death by hunger. And this famine, the major causes of this famine were failed Soviet agricultural policies. Because of a rush to collectivization, most of the experienced Ukrainian peasants who held land were termed as kulaks, wealthy peasants, and most of them were liquidated. They were pulled in trains to Siberia and Central Asia and sent there to die, while all the farmland were given to the new collective farms, which the co-hosts with farmers with little agricultural experience, so they could not manage like that much harvest to be used for industrialization. But because Ukraine was historically the breadbasket of Europe, it has the largest. It contains like 3/4 of all the black soil terrains in the world, nestled by the very rich Dnieper Basin. So it's a natural hub for wheat. As you can see, even today in the midst of war, Ukraine is still the third largest wheat exporter in the world. So in that time, Ukraine was the breadbasket of the Soviet Union. Nearly all the agricultural produce comes from Ukraine or in the regions of Russia close to Ukraine. So despite the agricultural failures in Ukraine following a small drought and agricultural mismanagement caused by the liquidation of the kulaks, the Russians still demanded like great amounts of grain quota to be served from Ukrainian peasants so that they can export the Ukrainian grain, which led to a shortage of food in Ukraine. And collectivization was met with a lot of like internal resistance because let's say you have a farm and suddenly the Soviet authorities want to take it away with no reward. So it's natural for the landowning peasants to start peasant revolts against the Soviet Union and to refuse to join the collective farms, which were part of their property that they have bought with their own work and their inherited from their families. So the large-scale peasant uprisings and suppressions resulted in a significant destruction in the agricultural infrastructure, which it led to a lot of Ukraine's most fertile land being unsuitable for farming. So after this period, with increasing grain quotas and more shortage of food, Ukraine entered a very destructive famine, which lasted for a little bit more than a year and killed around conservative estimates are around 4 million people, mostly peasants of Ukraine. And this does not affect the urban dwellers who mostly are entered into the service of factories or to build large infrastructure projects. For example, the Dnipro has the largest dam on the Dnieper River in modern-day Dnipropetrovsk. But this was a severe blow to the Ukrainian peasantry because first of all, hunger undermines like peasants' will to resist. They when they were like banned from harvesting anything from the fields, and they had to starve watching all of the grain being taken away from their own hands. The only thing they can think of is how to survive, how to survive and how to get enough food to eat, and they would not concentrate their efforts into thinking of how to rebel against the Soviet Union. And also because Ukraine was a primary agrarian society, so all of its traditions, all of its culture, its even its natural identity, as has been stressed, like it's mostly within the peasant populace. So killing a large proportion of the peasant populace leads to a loss of this like national heritage, which makes it easier for the Soviet Union to use Russian culture to dominate over Ukrainian society for the future 5 decades. So this was about the Holodomor. Still up to today, Russia still denies playing any role in the Holodomor and citing it as a natural famine and as the product of failed agricultural policy due due to the errors of officials and also the Ukrainian peasants who decided to revolt and destroy their own crops. But more and more Western scholarship predominantly have tried to prove that the Holodomor did indeed constitute a genocide against the Ukrainian nation. It was a genocide in that the Soviet Union deliberately weaponized hunger, used procurement quotas and blacklisted localities, and also other agricultural policies to deliberately starve Ukrainians despite enough harvest to feed the population. So after this, Ukraine entered an era of complete dominance by the Soviet Union. This was enhanced by World War II, in which Ukrainian soldiers served alongside their Russian counterparts to break the German offensive into Soviet Union. But there were still rebel leaders in Ukraine who disagreed with this perspective. For example, one prominent leader was Stepan Bandera. He led the Ukrainian insurgent army in Western Ukraine during World War II. During this period, Bandera himself was the son of a former Ukrainian veteran in World War I. He believes that Ukraine should be independent from both Russia and also from Western powers, domination of Western powers, and they should create an ethnically unitary Ukraine nation without the existence of like Russian minorities and also Polish minorities from the West. So after he grew up and founded the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, he built the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. And so at first he cooperated with the Nazi regime. He allowed the Nazi Germans to enter Ukraine to and he envisioned Ukraine to become a satellite state of Nazi Germany, so that they can drive the Soviets away and stop Russian domination over Ukraine. But he later found his plan wrong because the Nazis also want to dominate Ukraine and want to strip it of its Jewish population, and they also believe the Slavs to be like inferior race. So Stefan Bandera, so after he decided to stop his cooperation with the Nazis, which led to his being captured into a concentration camp for 4 years. And near the end of the war, he was released to lead the Ukrainian insurgent army again because Nazi Germany believed that he would be a popular appeal to the Ukrainians who want to resist the Red Army from taking over Ukraine again. Because at the end of World War II, as the Red Army pushed west, many Ukrainians did not want to being readmitted to the Soviet Union. So that was what the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists did during this period. They fought against both Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, and yeah, their efforts eventually ended in a failure. Bandera was exiled to Munich, where he was killed by a KGB agent. And this still proves to be a hardship between Russo-Ukrainian relations because if you have listened to Putin's speeches in February of 2022, he often made references to neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and neo-Nazis were his terms for the followers of Stepan Bandera because they cooperated with the Nazi regime to try to liberate Ukraine from Soviet rule. Also, Bandera, he was a very controversial figure because he committed mass atrocities during World War II. He systematically murdered more than 10,000 Polish residents of modern day Bohemia. So that proves to be of kind of a setback between Polish-Ukrainian relations today, especially with the now nationalist Polish president Kyivan Rus. He was a World War II historian. He believed that Ukraine should admit that they have committed ethnic cleansing of Polish people within Ukrainian borders. So after World War II, Ukraine entered a period of slow, stagnant development. under Soviet rule, but near the dissolution of the Soviet Union, more and more opposition voices began to rise. First of all, it was the works of the famous physicist Sakharov. Sakharov advocated for autonomy and for more transparency of the Soviet government, also for more nationalist rights for Ukraine. And there was also the Ukrainian author Ivan Juba, who wrote the book Russification, or okay, it doesn't matter. Again, the Ukrainian author Ivan Juba, who wrote books to protest against Russification of Ukraine, and this ended with the final foundation of the Ukrainian Helsinki Group, dedicated to supervision of Helsinki Accord signed by Soviet Union and the United States, to preserve the nationalist rights of different nations within the Soviet Union. And the final straw of Soviet Union was, as you know, very famous. It's the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. The Soviet Union tried to hide that this had occurred 2 days after the massive explosion, until the acidic air reached above Sweden and they detected the acidic rain and protested to the United Nations. So this demonstrates the incapability of the Soviet government to respond rapidly to these kind of humanitarian disasters, and ended with more and more Ukrainian protests to Soviet rule, which led to the formation of the Ruch, the first nationalist party in Ukraine. And eventually Ukraine voted for independence in its 1991 referendum on August the 24th. And yeah, so Ukraine was the first country, not the first country, but one of the first countries to declare its independence from the Soviet Union. And this proves to be very important because Ukraine is the second largest republic within the Soviet Union after Russia. So Ukraine's departure directly symbolizes the fall and the failure of the entire union. So after Ukraine achieved its independence under its first president, Leonid Kravchuk, two major treaties were signed. The first one was the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, in which Ukraine agreed to renounce its nuclear arsenal in exchange for nuclear protection from Britain, the United Kingdom, and also Russia. The second one was the partition of the Black Sea Fleet, signed in 1997. It concerns the city of Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula, which still houses the Russian Black Sea Fleet, although it is part of Ukrainian territory after Khrushchev transferred Crimea to Ukraine in 1954. So the partition was that Russia retains operation rights to the port of Sevastopol. It retains 80% of the fleet, while Ukraine receives 20%. And so there are two other dividing events between Ukraine and Russia occurred in the 21st century. The first one was the Orange Revolution, when incumbent president Leonid Kuchma was too unpopular, and so the 2004 election became a contest between Viktor Yushchenko and Viktor Yanukovych. Yushchenko was pro-European. He believed in the institutes of the European Union, while Yanukovych was pro-Russian. He believes in drawing closer relations with Russia. So the first stage of the election was marked by fraud, as Yushchenko himself was poisoned, and he sustained wounds that lasted and can be still seen on his face. And Yanukovych won narrowly in the second round of the election, but there were wide allegations of voter fraud and Russian intervention in the election. So the Ukrainian public took to the streets in a massive demonstration where they waved their orange scarves and armbands from the Orange Revolution, which eventually led to a re-election, to a second counting of the votes, and Yushchenko was declared the winner. However, Yushchenko's popularity had fallen by 2010, so Yanukovych was elected as the fourth president again. And by 2013, Yanukovych had declined to further integrate with the European Union, which sparked more protests from the Ukrainian population, termed the Euromaidan. The Euromaidan was Ukrainian protest for greater cooperation with Europe instead of Yanukovych's growing cooperation with Russia. And this culminated in grand repression as Yanukovych mobilized the Ukrainian army to try to put down protesters, which resulted in the February 24th Revolution of Dignity, in which the Ukrainian population they occupied the streets of Kiev and took out their arms and gradually had kind of a fight with the National Guard and the National Police, which eventually ended with Yanukovych's self-exile to Russia. So the Russian government was very displeased with this set of events, so it decided to intervene militarily in Ukraine, capturing the Crimean Peninsula in 2014 and annexing it. and also supporting the separatist groups in the Donbas. The Donbas is the mining-rich region of southeastern Ukraine, which is primarily inhabited by ethnic Russians. This was mainly the result of internal migration, as designed as the policy of Russification in the 18th and 19th centuries, in which Russia emigrated a lot of ethnic Russians from Russia to modern day southeastern Ukraine to try to infiltrate the Ukrainian population. So the Donbas is home to the most of the industry and the mines in the Ukrainian territory. So an internal civil war breaking out in the region is a severe blow to the Ukrainian nation with its industrial capacities and modern day function and everyday function. So to try to stop the war, two sets of agreements were signed in 2015. They were combinedly known as the Minsk Agreements, in which European leaders supervised Putin and then Ukrainian President Poroshenko to start a ceasefire in the Donbas. But after the Minsk Agreements, small conflicts still break out in the Donbas from time to time, in which insurgents fight against the Ukrainian army supported by Russian militia. And this eventually ended with Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 on the February 24th, which had continued for 3 years until now.
Yeah. So that was really a very thorough explanation of the history. It's really amazing that Raffles is able to do stuff like this. Um, what were your initial feelings when you heard of the news that Russia had invaded Ukraine? Because I think it was right after the Winter Olympics, and for some time there was some discussion that perhaps an invasion would happen. But I personally at the time did not think an invasion would happen, like a full-out invasion. But then it happened. What was your initial reaction?
Well, my reactions were kind of similar with yours. Like, I've read news about the event. I saw like different reports of, for example, some U.S. media have guessed that an imminent invasion might occur during the Winter Olympics in that region because Russia has mobilized its troops along the Ukrainian border.
Yeah.
But I personally did not believe that much. I think it's still like some kind of Russian support for the Donbas militias.
Yeah.
But when it turns out to be a full-scale invasion, I was also like very surprised. And so after I saw the news, I went back to try to read more and decipher more of the regional history to find out like why this had happened at this particular time, and also why like Putin's excuses for announcing the invasion, like to suppress the neo-Nazis and also defending ethnic Russians' interests in the region.
And also to prevent NATO expansion.
Yes.
I also started reading some history of the historical reasons for that, but I only went as far as the Budapest Memorandum, so I did not know any of the other stuff that you discussed.
Yeah, that's one of the immediate causes after Ukrainian independence. Many people have said Russia's invasion would be a violation of the Budapest Memorandum.
Yeah.
I personally agree with that perspective because it provides Russian protection.
Yeah.
But the roots of the conflict, like the long gaining animosity between the Russian and Ukrainian ethnic groups, as very related, you can even say that they're East Slavic brothers. This continues. This started a long time ago, from the time of the Cossack Rebellion, and it's the result of conflict historical events. Like, you cannot just basically conclude that this happens because Ukraine was angered that Russia started, for example, started a famine on their lands. It was a bit of like different cultural identities and perceptions on history and their relative status.
Yeah. So, I have another question. So, at the start of the war, Russia made very rapid advances.
Yes.
They were like miles within Kiev in a matter of 3 days or something.
That's like the first 2 or 3 days.
The first 2 or 3 days. So, what was your prediction at that time on how the war would go? Would Kiev be captured in the next few days, or did you think that perhaps later, Kiev would be able to make advances in the opposite direction as we're seeing now?
Well, at the start of the war, my initial reaction was shock. So I did not think. I was not very optimistic. I believe
I wasn't
with the Russian offensive, I believe they would take Kyiv probably with a few days and will try to struggle to get the west of Ukraine. But I did not make very bold predictions because at that time I'm not very familiar with the military conditions of both the Russian and Ukrainian armies.
the war's been going on for quite some time now, 3 years, and recently, or not really recently, but after Trump's re-election, peace talks have started again. I think the peace talks before that, you have to go back to early 2023 when the Russians and Ukrainians met for a few times in, like, I think Belarus and in Turkey.
Yes,
But
I believe so.
and then they stopped having peace talks, perhaps because of the war, and now they're having peace talks again. So, do you have any? What's your view on these peace talks? Do you think they're going to succeed?
Well, actually, I'm not very optimistic about the success of these peace talks. First of all, of course, we know that these peace talks were kind of the result of bilateral pressures on Russia and Ukraine by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump wants Ukraine to sacrifice some of its national benefits to give the U.S. more interest in the region, to help in reconstruction, and to pay, like, I believe they were asked to pay some war reparations, yes, to both to the U.S., like, for
the
aiding its reconstruction, yes. And for Russia, it obviously entails, like, evacuating from the Ukrainian territories that it has occupied, which Putin would not do, because this would undermine his one of his most significant actions, which is to launch the invasion, to enlarge Russian territory and influence in the region, and to counter NATO influence. Because if he agrees to evacuate, it will be his like political disaster, as he would be unable to realize his political pledge. So I believe peace talks will be inconclusive, at least in the recent future, because Zelenskyy and Putin have radically different views. Zelenskyy himself, he was intent on Putin, like, the Russian army from evacuating from all of the Ukrainian territory it has occupied, including Crimea, from 2014. But Putin would never agree to that. Putin's vision would be that Russia would occupy the forest oblasts of Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and Crimea that it has occupied it has gained in the war, and that Ukraine has to be demilitarized. I think that would be Russia's condition, so they don't kind of meet.
Yeah, so you think, so barring any dramatic escalation or event such as, like, an assassination or something, you think the current peace talks are unlikely to be conclusive, that they're going to fail and the war is just going to go on?
Yes, I believe the war will continue, at least in the immediate future.
So
yes, that would be my point. If, like, nothing major, such as any assassinations or immense internal political turmoil, for example, the overthrow of a regime, occurs.
Yeah. So the only way that this will end is if something's decided on the battlefield, or if enough foreign pressure is put.
Well, foreign pressure would probably, for example, I think Zelenskyy is now still very dependent on the support of
the EU, at least.
the U.S. and also the European countries behind them. But I think if European diplomacy weakens its support for Zelenskyy, he will probably have to accept the Russian terms. And also for Putin, because there exists a lot of, like, sanctions and Western pressure on Russia to stop its ongoing war if Russia, like, loses a few more of its allies. For example, just in the most hypothetical sense, if China condemns Russia to stop its war, to stop its aggression, Russia will probably have to accept the Ukrainian terms. And the other possibility is the success of the opposition in the country, because for example, in Ukraine, many people have questioned Zelenskyy's legitimacy in his continuation in his term as president. And also there are prominent dissidents in Russia, also, as we have seen Grigory what's his name, Prigozhin. He led the Wagner group, and he launched a minor revolt, I believe in June 2023.
Yeah, I thought it was Marshal Moscow, but he's dead now.
Yes, but he's dead now. And also there is Alexei Navalny, who is also dead.
He's also dead now. So.
But there may be, like, new dissidents who disagrees with Putin's battles, because Russia is still, like, greatly influenced by the power of oligarchs, and it kind of sometimes depends on their political will.
So which one do you think is the most likely to succeed? Because I personally think it's foreign pressure. Yes,
I'll agree.
For example, perhaps U.S. pressure. I'm not sure about Chinese pressure, but I think U.S. pressure. If Trump can, like, double down on his pressure on Putin, then perhaps something will happen. But
yes,
he doesn't
believe
see
that will
will.
because Trump looks like the kind of person who may who may try to enforce like his pressures, for example, conducting minor raids against Russia or like a more serious international like um I believe acts of aggression. Not really, but Trump has his way of enforcing pressure. So yes, so I believe the most likely outcome of the war at the present would be it depends on Trump's own political outlook on the event, how he wants to end it. Because Trump has made conflicting claims on both sides. He sometimes claims that he is very supportive of Ukraine, and other times he asks Zelenskyy to make concessions, and also describes Zelenskyy himself as a despot.
Yeah, he's not very coherent. He says whatever he thinks at the time.
I think like Trump's may put pressure on Putin, but at the end of the day, like I don't think Putin is like Trump's like puppet or something like that. Putin is a person that has his own view and visions, and I think that the situation is quite similar to what we had before the Minsk agreement in 2014 and 2015. That under like foreign pressure, peace deal might be available and might be imminent, but I don't think that it's going to be very long term or like very effective because at the state of the war, like both countries are seeking for victory. The Ukrainians are seeking to expel the Russians from their territory, and the Russians are seeking for further advances on Ukrainian soil. So I don't think that based on the conflicting like interests, even though a short-term peace might be achieved, I don't think it's going to be very long-lasting at last.
No, I don't think the tensions between Russia and Ukraine allow peace to ever be long-lasting because the tensions go well into the past.
Unless some fundamental changes occur.
Unless,
for example, in regime or in international reconciliation, which would be very hard.
On a completely unrelated note, I had a small question about. So we were talking about Trump's diplomacy. What do you think about Trump's negotiating methods? Because his negotiating methods are not very they're not very conventional, but they do seem to get results.
Yes, they do seem to be effective. What I see is that aside from the Russo-Ukrainian peace talks, for example, in other scenarios, Trump sometimes just asks for one side to make significantly more concessions than the other and put pressures on the other side. For example, in the Israel-Hamas peace talks, he pressures Hamas to accept his 20 points. Or else they'll face like imminent destruction. But also in as you can see, Armenia and Azerbaijan, Trump also put significant benefits on for Azerbaijan because he recognizes Nagorno-Karabakh as Azerbaijani territory and paved the way for the corridor between the exclave of Nakhchivan and the Azerbaijan mainland to be connected within the highway within Armenia territory and for the corridor to be administered by himself and named after himself.
I did not know that. So let's again going off topic. About Israel and Hamas, I don't really understand why Hamas accepted the 20 points because they're even with the 20 points, they're still getting kicked out of power, right?
Well, yes. The thing about I believe Hamas has to accept the 20 points because it's kind of a basis of a small chance of survival against no chance of survival. Because if they do not accept the 20 points, Trump may the Israeli army, they totally have the capability to just wipe out Hamas very quickly and to inflict severe damages on the Palestinian civilian populace, which they have already done, but they can do it greater. The thing about the war in Gaza now is that Gaza is a very small area, but Israel is pushing its advance very slowly because it still takes into account some of the civilian well-beings, although it has been like very atrocious on the battlefields. So they still distribute leaflets to call Palestinian people to evacuate from the areas. And because this will be very hard, because Hamas often disguises itself among the population, so you cannot distinguish between who is a Hamas militant and who is a regular a common person. So this is the issue in Israel and Palestine. And for Hamas, I think the 20 points includes a section in which it details that Hamas has to lose its power in the Gaza Strip, but former Hamas members who surrender to the Israeli forces may voluntarily go into exile and still continue their lives. We know that the Gaza Strip is still thriving on Hamas is still thriving on international international aid, because most of the international aid poured into the Gaza Strip went into the pockets of Hamas and the headquarters in Qatar.
Yeah.
So after they accept the 2040s, they may still live kind of a prosperous life abroad, although with no political power.
Yeah.
But if they do not accept it, it's probably
death.
Yes, death.
Okay. So back to our topic. So you think it's rather unlikely that any peace will be achieved in the short term or even long term, really?
For long term, there are too many variations, but in short term, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah. So do you have any comments on like the Alaska summit and Washington summit?
Do you think it's like political theater, or do you think real progress was made by Alaska and Washington?
Well, are you referring to the meetings between Trump and Putin?
Yeah, Trump and Putin in Alaska.
Yeah, Alaska.
Trump and European leaders in.
Oh, I see.
In Washington.
That's a very good question. In the Washington summit, we see a lot of European presidents coming as if they're like guarding Zelenskyy and to try to bargain with Trump to increase his aid for Ukraine and basically for the European war efforts. I think at least for the Washington summit, probably not that much progress has been made because Trump still maintains his foreign policy of America first. He places like many European leaders sometimes in awkward positions.
Small shifts.
Yes, and he does not. He still tries to exert his authority over Zelenskyy even in their conversation. So I believe that was more of European leaders' attempt to convince Trump, but that was not largely successful. But may have contributed to a little change in perspective. But we also know that Trump's like foreign policy is not very coherent. He sometimes just posts on his social media like
whatever
he found out something about Russia and he thinks he should increase aid for Ukraine. So we never know like his motives for changing his foreign policy. As for Alaska, I believe I'm not sure whether it is like very fruitful, but it does definitely conveys a very strong message to the world that Trump is willing to enter talks with Putin. He does not regard him as like an evil dictator who invades another country. He regards him as a global partner who has his own like country's interests and has to abide by them. And regards him as his like even as his guest of honor.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have any other questions you'd like to ask Russians?
Yeah, sure. So, okay. So in terms of Ukraine, it has been receiving lots of foreign aids, no matter from the U.S., for Canada, or like for the European Union. So do you think that this kind of foreign aid is gonna sustain, like in terms of U.S. foreign aid, European foreign aid, and Canadian other allies foreign aid?
Well, I believe it depends. For European foreign aid, I believe it will continue to come at least from several devoted European countries. At least all the European NATO countries have agreed to like increase their government budget for defense up to 5%. And for some of the Eastern European countries, for example, Poland, most notably Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, they now commit like around 3 to 5% of their annual GDP to aid Ukraine. Although these countries have little military capabilities themselves, but they still send their most advanced weapons and personnel to help the Ukrainian war effort. So I believe at least the devotion of Eastern European countries and also of like, for example, Germany to Ukraine would still be long lasting. But for other countries such as Spain, Italy, and the United Kingdom, the United Kingdom's policies sometimes depend on the will of the United States. And as for Spain and Italy, Spain is a left-leaning government which has like interest in peace and more sympathy for the stop of war. So it may not be committed to the Ukrainian war effort that much. And Italy is a right-wing government, so it probably will focus more on itself than uniting with other European countries to provide aid to Ukraine. And as for Canada, I think Canada will still play a major part because Mark Carney of the Liberal Party, he still says he will continue his aid for Ukraine even in the face of Trump's in the face of infuriating the United States. But for the US, it's still depends on Trump's sporadic inspirations.
That depends on his mood. Yeah, I also think that European support should be steadfast because quite simply it's a European war and it's a European matter.
Yeah.
If they can't repel Russia, then it's going to have rather catastrophic consequences for
Well, it is indeed their greatest threat.
Yeah.
Many Europeans, they have somehow learned from history because Putin now is asking for before a blast in eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if we have to say it, if we have to say it badly, we can compare it to the Munich Agreement.
Yeah. You mentioned like 3% to 5% spending, but I think that's
Yes, please continue.
okay. Or do you have some?
No, I wanted to make a comment on the 3 European countries you named. I think Spain is the only country in NATO that has not reached the 5%.
Yes, Trump has commented.
Yeah, Trump has commented on that.
Well, I think like a lot of like European countries have like fiscal difficulties in meeting this goal.
Yeah, but they've all done it.
True, but they have mostly completed up to present.
Okay.
Yes, because on one hand because of Trump's pressure, on the other hand because I think they also do realize that security is important.
Yes.
And also, but I think in the UK, the current government under Keir Starmer has been rather steadfast also
Yes.
in their support. Now if Labour leaves the office, then I don't know what's going to happen. But at least as long as Labour is in office and as long as Keir Starmer is Prime Minister, I think support should be steadfast.
Well, yes, I agree with your point.
Yeah.
But still, the UK's foreign policy is a bit more dependent on, for example, US support and then the other continental US powers, the European powers. Yes.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think under like the US is quite a variable here, but US has been constantly like the largest contributor to Ukraine. So
Yes.
if US is a variable, how does this change the calculus of war of Ukraine?
Well, of course, if US aid is like variable over the different periods, it may lead to like different periods of more strength in the Ukrainian war effort and sometimes more setbacks as the Ukrainians receive less weapons and less provisions to continue the war effort. But I think some European countries will try to make up for a bit of this. But the United States, because due to its massive industrial and arms like manufacturing sector, it is still like European countries are still incomparable to the magnitude of aid that it can offer.
Yeah, I actually think that the Washington summit is quite a good example of this. Like European leaders have to rush to Washington just to have meeting instead of like asking like Donald Trump to Europe or something like that.
Yes, it's kind of sarcastic, and it's also the result of a bit of demilitarization in Europe in the past half century. They did not have sufficient like defense forces to cope against the war because they did not reckon that such a war would occur.
Yeah.
And there is a meme on the internet that says that the 5 billion people the 500 million people of Europe needs the protection of the 300 million people of the US.
Yeah, it's quite sad.
Yeah, actually, I just read this earlier this night that Zelenskyy is scheduled to have another meeting with Trump.
Yeah, I think
on Friday.
Yes,
and
I heard of that.
He should wear a suit.
Yeah, and Trump is actually considering whether to send a long-range missile to Ukraine. Is that true? The Tomahawk missile.
Yeah, I think it is, but I'm not really that well acquainted with all of these military weapons, so I don't really understand the whole significance of.
Well, me neither. I'm kind of a rookie on military technology.
Yeah, I actually don't know much, but I heard it's a long-range missile or
they should be good. They should be very good for air defenses and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But you never know whether Trump is really going to send them.
Oh yeah, Trump. I mean, he can.
Well, true. His promises are somehow.
Yeah, I think he does whatever he wants to do when he wakes up in the morning, or not even in the morning. For example, like whatever he wants to do at the current moment, he does that.
At the moment, he swings his golf club.
Yeah.
Yeah. One question that is not listed on the PPT. Yeah, we've seen like Russia is sending drones to Poland. Is that right? Poland and
yes, and Romania airspace, I believe.
Yeah, they're getting into NATO airspace. And they're trying to test the limits of NATO.
And yeah, I also think they have like jammed Alliance GPS or something like that.
I think they've done some funky stuff with like the technology at airports in Germany, in Denmark. And I think they have like it may not be Russian, but there are unidentified drones flying in Danish and German airspace, and they think it's from Russia, but I don't know for sure. So do you think Putin will try to widen the conflict, or not widen? Like, will he try to invade other countries
or like
spread the conflict, or will he stay in Ukraine?
Well, I believe the possibility of this is very small at the moment. First of all, Ukraine is still the main still where Putin has to concentrate his troops at, because if Putin diverts his troops and provisions to, for example, to wage warfare with another country, his war lines in Ukraine would be insecure and be subject, for example, to counteroffensives. And also because most European countries other than Ukraine are part of NATO, so although it has not been tested whether like every other NATO member would go to the aid if another is invaded, but I believe this still serves as a very strong like ideological threat to Putin. Like he would not dare to invade even the smallest NATO country, even like Lithuania or Estonia, to try to test the alliance's limits, because they may also like because other NATO powers may indeed send drones and other weapons and directly attack Russia. And the thing about Ukraine is that Ukraine is also sending drones to like mainland Russian territory in several different campaigns. So Ukraine has adopted I think it has adopted a policy of trying to knock out for example, Russian oil facilities and also other like relating to backup to cut off the Russian, I think, economic lifeline.
I think they launched an attack on a drone attack deep in Russia, and they targeted mainly oil and also Russian drones and also like factories.
Yeah, so we can see the impact of new military technology, new military tactics, which is to like damage the enemy's like provision, because that is important for the continuation of the war efforts.
Yeah, so what do you guys think? Why did Putin like actually send drones to Poland and Romania? What was the significance of this move?
I think he's trying to
Just to
see what I think he's trying to gauge their reaction and see what they're going to do in response to this.
So I totally agree. Like because we've seen from the clips over this, several weeks ago, the Polish foreign minister announced to Putin that they'll hit down all drones he has sent to Polish airspace, and initiating a very strong reply.
Yeah, they need to make a very resolute reply so that Putin will be deterred from doing stuff like this in the future.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So well, thank you very much for your time, Raffles.
Thank you very much.
I think we agree with you on many points. I think it's great to agree with think alike to a great mind.
Yes, I definitely agree.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and
pleasure.
Bye.
Okay, so
Okay, bye.
see you next time.